And then we've got to very briefly say, hey, here's what we're going to be doing. And then what I think you should do is, because you're the one who asks, so where are we going first?
Right.
Like, let's not mention any of that until it's like, we're going to Ottawa, the site of the first Lincoln Douglas debate in Northern Illinois, you know, and then literally we probably cut it.
So this is Graham Peck. He's an historian specializing in Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. Hi.
I'm Nathan. I am a sculptor and an artist of a variety of different forms, video, etc. And we are on the road in 2020, in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. We are entering into Ottawa, Illinois right now. What are we doing on the road right now?
Well, we're imprudent, but we're also interested in the current moment. We've got a society that's being racked by a number of problems, one of them being COVID, but a lot of economic suffering due to the shutdowns in the economy, and a lot of frustration with the long-term issues of equality in our society. And of course, these issues are global in many respects. So there's protests rolling through America and rolling through the globe. And a lot of these protests are about history.
Right. And history is, like, obviously something that we can't necessarily control, but something that's interesting is how we represent history, right? So I know on this trip we're planning to meet up with some reenactors, and that's one way that we represent history. And also on the road we're going to be sort of coming across statues. That's another way that we represent history.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Last week, we told you that House Speaker Michael Madigan intends to move forward to instruct the Office of the Architect here on the Capitol grounds to remove the statue of U.S. Senator Stephen Douglas from the front steps just outside the Capitol. It stands about 75 yards behind the statue of Abraham Lincoln. Those two men, of course, were political rivals back in their day. We wanted to understand a little bit more about the history of who Stephen Douglas was. Speaker Madigan said that statue is a symbol of hate and cited his wife's and his ownership of a plantation in Mississippi, along with his disparaging remarks about people of color from years ago, as two of his primary reasons why he wants to see that statue come down. Joining us now is a Lincoln Studies professor from the University of Illinois Springfield, Professor Graham Peck, actually the Wepner Distinguished Professor of Lincoln Studies at the university there. Professor, it's good to have you with us.
We're going to be sort of mixing and matching some of these things together. So what are we going to do here in Ottawa?
We are going to be visiting the first site of the Lincoln Douglas debates in 1858. Ottawa's in northern Illinois, tended to be an anti-slavery section of the state, and both men were going to go at it. The debates were 3 hours in length. People would stand and listen, and the debates have taken on such significance in American history that a lot of the debate sites have been preserved quite well.
Sweet. Who is our first Lincoln?
Our first Lincoln is Kevin Wood, who is actually a trilingual Lincoln. He's a very good bilingual Lincoln, but he can do Lincoln in multiple languages. He's from Chicago. He's a marathon runner and a pastor as well.
So ridiculously multi-talented. And where are we going to go?
We are going to go to Washington Square, where we will find a beautiful memorial to the two men.
Whoa! Hey! Wow! Woo. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I will say here, while upon this subject, that I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so. and I have no inclination to do so. I agree with Judge Douglas. He was not my equal in many respects. Certainly not in color, perhaps not in moral and intellectual endowment, but in the right to eat the bread without the leave of anybody else, which his own hand earns. He is my equal, and the equal of Judge Douglas, and the equal of every living man. Well, you could certainly take things that Lincoln said right here in Ottawa, and you recorded some of them. He would not be in favor of introducing perfect equality between the races, or doesn't think that it's practical to have. And that was the anti-slavery person speaking. That was the progressive person speaking. Right. Douglas said straight out, I am not in favor of the Negro having citizenship. The Negro should never be a citizen of this country, is basically what he said.
There's no question he was overtly racist, right? I mean, he said in the first debate, the Lincoln-Douglas debate, I went back and read through some of those. I just wanted to get a better bearing on what exactly it was he believed. And he said this trying to scare white people in Illinois in a free state. He asked them, quote, "Do you desire to turn this beautiful state into a free Negro colony in order that when Missouri abolishes slavery, she can send 100,000 emancipated slaves to Illinois to become citizens and voters on an equality with yourselves?" He's scaring them by the fright that 100,000 black people would come to Illinois and live here and vote and be on an equal playing field with them. That's overtly racist, is it not?
And so you take what Douglas said today, I mean, he's certainly ripe for attack, which is why in Chicago, as we said, I think they probably will fairly soon decide to change the name of Douglas Park. Whether they do something with his statue, I don't know, because that's at his home, and his home, it does tell a story, a very important story of a very important man, and he represented views of people of his own day, and so, it all gets to how do we interpret history, though, and what's the best way for us to interpret history.
Now, why do you do it? What is interesting? Is it just because your likeness?
So for years and years, it was just a hobby. But it's basically because of my love of history and the physical resemblance, and those two merging. If I happened to look like Stephen Douglas, I don't think I ever would have started doing Douglas. Because something about Lincoln, just his character, what he did for our nation at a very critical time in our nation's history. His honesty, his compassion, his hard work, all the qualities that we admire in him.
Big exit 1.9 miles to Freeport. So what are we doing in Freeport?
We are filming Tim Connors at George Bus, the most dynamic Lincoln Douglas picture. They're going to throw our socks off for reproducing parts of the Freeport debate. George Bus, St. Thomas.
Very nice to meet you. Welcome to Freeport. Hello there, Nathan. Hello.
Wow. You guys are freaking awesome.
I appreciate that.
How long have you guys been doing this? How long have you been doing this?
Oh, this has been a decade or more. Yes, 12 years.
Wow. I've spent a lot of my life looking at these faces, and you guys are really fantastic.
Thank you.
Impersonators. This is great. Do you guys want to sit down and have a conversation, and then we can start shooting?
Love
Sure.
to.
Let's come on over this way. Good to see you, George.
Good to see you, Graham, as always. Lincoln Douglas, take 22.
See, you must remember everybody knew who Stephen A. Douglas was, but few people had any idea who Lincoln was. During my campaign appearances, guess who kept showing up? Speaking before, speaking after, speaking the same day, speaking the day before, speaking the day after. Mr. Lincoln, when would it stop? So I agreed to the debates in an effort to thwart his dogging me across the state. if Douglas doesn't seem real, I'm going to lose everybody. Douglas is bombastic, and he lets everybody have it at times. But that's how he was, and that's what the word stated on the research that I did. He is this. He's bombastic. He's loud. He's abrasive, but he cares about his country, and that always has to come through. Need I remind you that at age 21, I was Illinois Secretary of State. At age 27, I was a justice on the Illinois Supreme Court. At age 30, I was a United States Congressman. By age 37, I was a senator from Illinois. And at age 41, I was the leader of the National Democratic Party. I was considered for the presidential nomination from said party in 1852 and in 1856.
I've read some historians say that without Douglas there would be no Lincoln. One, do you agree with that statement? And two, more broadly, why do you think that statement is so prevalent? Was there something about Douglas himself that helped to catapult Lincoln to national popularity?
Absolutely. That statement is true, and it's actually almost a truism among historians. It's not really debated. The reason is because of what I just mentioned. Stephen Douglas was the greatest, in my view, the most important politician of the entire 1850s, which is very rare for a senator to have that stature. His name was known throughout the country.
There was from the beginning a flaw in the founding documents, compounded by the cobbled up mess of the compromises and the Fugitive Slave Act. But it was the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 that put politics back in my mouth like I had never tasted it before.
Starting in 1854, Lincoln decides to follow him around the central portions of the state. This was not the 1858 debates. This was in 1854. And Lincoln develops his great, what's called the Peoria Address, this extraordinary anti-slavery speech. Still to this day, my favorite Lincoln speech. And it's Lincoln's emergence as a profoundly significant anti-slavery leader. And he will end up being the prime player building the Republican Party in Illinois. And by 1860, having successfully done that, having built this party in Illinois, he would end up being selected in the Chicago Convention, the Republican National Party Convention, which was held in Chicago. He was selected as the presidential nominee. And only at that moment did he finally supplant Douglas, who was also a presidential nominee, but was finally beaten by Lincoln. And Lincoln, of course, lost to him in the 1858 debates.
Mm-hmm. On the Lincoln-Douglas debate site at Freeport, we commemorate an event, not the gladiators, but the fact that they met as gladiators on that green space. Now, also in the history of Freeport, this is the only place that we found documentation that both Stephen Douglas and Frederick Douglass were here together at the same time. They each heard each other speak within a 24-hour window. Where is that commemorated? Mm-hmm. It's in the primary source documents. Mm-hmm. So how when do we now take the next step forward to add to our history? I'm going to get preachy. Preach! Mm-hmm. Okay. Preach! Where do we commemorate as a community? Because this is the first location of the Winnebago trip taken by Dick Durbin and Barack Obama after the Democratic National Committee met, the convention, where one of the keynotes was Illinois Junior Senator Barack Obama. This was the first place he came. And we know the door of the library where he walked in, and we know the letter Dick Durbin wrote that was published where he said that he discovered Obama mania because at least 80% of those folks that assembled at the Freeport Public Library were Republican.
He sat on the bus. When they got on the bus and they went home, Durbin looked at Barack Obama and said, "Do you know what I've just noticed? 60 to 70% of these people are Republicans.
and they all came to see you. You know what that means, Barry? You need to run for president. That was because of Freeport.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So we haven't even told that story yet. You're gonna get you get this story.
Exclusive.
You got the exclusive, man. Exclusive. The sound went out. Oh no!
No, that's okay.
Oh no!
That's okay. We got it. We got it.
We're skipping Jonesboro and Charleston because they are a long way out of our way. Far south of Jonesboro, which was very difficult for Lincoln and Douglas, but we are going to avert that peril and travel in a nice, concise semicircle around the state of Illinois.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 5th debate between Senator Douglas and Abraham Lincoln of Springfield, Illinois. In this corner, at 6'4", weighing 185 pounds, from Springfield, Illinois, the lawyer, the rail splitter, Abraham Lincoln.
So according to your many texts, if I remember correctly, it's in Galesburg that we've got this really interesting talent that we're going to be working with. Who do we have in Galesburg?
Max and Donna Daniels.
Max and Donna Daniels. And they are portraying
Abraham and Mary Lincoln.
So this is a couple impersonating a couple.
You got it.
That should be fun. What inspired you as
Drugs. Alcohol.
Someone is going to shoot you someday. We got started doing this because we were actors in a community theater group. We actually met each other when we were cast together in a play. Very cute. But he's always looked like this. He's the right height. And one day we're sitting on the floor, we're surrounded with books and papers, and we looked at each other and we said, we're both actors, we have all of this wonderful material, wouldn't it make a good script? So we wrote ourselves a script called The Meeting of Mr. and Mrs. Lincoln. And we thought, hey, this is a good way to teach history in an entertaining way.
Judge Douglas declares that if any community wants slavery, they have a right to have it. He can say that logically if he says there is no wrong in slavery. If you admit that there is a wrong, then he cannot logically say that anybody has a right to do wrong.
So obviously, in the last few weeks, it's a question of whether Stephen A. Douglas's statue stay up in the state capitol.
What kind of logic says you do that? As I pointed out a while ago, there was a time that he was the driving force in the state of Illinois. So you don't necessarily agree with his politics. He's one of the linchpins for the state of Illinois. You can't just take things down and think it goes away. I've been thinking about getting a sign and standing in front of the state capitol and to quit using the name land of Lincoln. You're embarrassing me.
No matter what, right? It seems as though you have an opportunity for somebody to really feel as though they're being marginalized, either because the statue's there or because it's removed.
Exactly.
So no matter what, somebody is not going to be happy with the situation. So how do you create the situation where there's a meaningful opportunity for conversation on the subject?
Well, hopefully our filming will do that.
We'll certainly do our little part to save the world.
Absolutely. That is south. That is west. That is the John Wood Mansion. Love it. Pretty, Nathan. This is pretty.
stand by that great principle which declares that each state and each territory has the right to settle the question of slavery or any other domestic question for themselves. I hold that if they want a slave state, it is their right under the Constitution of the United States to make it so. And if they want a free state, it is their right to have it. I intend to stand by that principle no matter who else may desert it. I stand by that principle for the purpose of preserving peace.
And so Douglas's position was that we need to preserve the Union. It wasn't so much he was insulted by Lincoln. He saw both for the maintenance of his own power, but also for the survival of the country that he treasured, that this Republican doctrine, in his view, was a dangerous doctrine. And so he fought it tooth and nail.
Now, if each state would simply mind its own business and leave its neighbors alone, then there can be peace forever between us. If we stand by that principle, then Mr. Lincoln can see that this great republic can last forever, half free and half slaves, as our fathers made it and as the people voted for.
At this moment in history, do you feel as though portraying Douglas is the same as, say, 10 years ago?
I don't know how that's going to work out, frankly, and some of my friends have said, well, this isn't the best time to be doing Douglas. I know now in Springfield there has been some controversies over the name, and I never really thought that would happen. I always look at Douglas as somewhat of a forgotten man in Illinois. So I don't think people think about him all that much, but they in Springfield have come up with some issues that they thought were negative toward Douglas. I don't think we should try to revise history, or if we don't like the history, I don't think we should change it. I think we learn from history, and we can't revise all of the American history to fashion it how we want it.
Have you had any conversation with, especially I would say African Americans about Douglas? And if you have, how have they kind of broached this issue with you?
I have spoken to various people after a performance. Mm-hmm. You know, I have never once had anyone come up and be negative about Stephen Douglas. Interestingly enough, I have had African Americans say thank you for your portrayal because it's honest. And that's again what we're trying to do, is honestly, to the best of our ability, recreate the actions of two gentlemen who were major figures in the state of Illinois and of course the entire country. So I have felt very, very confident about that factor, and once again, any comments that I have ever received have been quite positive.
In the case of Douglas, we actually do have a pretty clear sense of many of his ideas on the slavery issue particularly. He certainly believed that states had the right to have slaves, but that was not exclusive to him. Everyone believed that because the Constitution essentially protected that right.
Provided for that opportunity.
Yeah, the federal government had no power over slavery in the states, so that was protected. The bigger debate was in the territories. Could the federal government prohibit slavery there or protect it there? And Douglas's position was to let the territorial settlers decide, although earlier in his career he was willing to consider other solutions, but that was the solution he chose when it seemed that it was the only pragmatic solution that could solve the problem. As for his moral position on slavery, he consistently refused to take a position, although, as Lincoln argued, the fact that he was willing to let other whites in new political communities establish slavery suggested an implicit explicit pro-slavery bias, that he couldn't think it was fundamentally wrong, or he wouldn't allow
Give
other
people the right to do wrong.
Yes, Lincoln literally uses that language.
Oh, I know. I was with that last night. I was editing that. I'm saying that was the single best line from Max last night that I was editing, especially his performance of it. It's like, well, you can't give somebody the right to do wrong. You know what I mean? It's like, that doesn't make any sense. You know, so you have to accept that it's right if you're going to give them the right to do it.
Yeah, or I guess put another way, if our country can expand westward and the cost is that some of those states or some of those citizens might still enslave people, then okay, so be it.
Yes, although to be fair, he expected that to be a small portion of the states where most states were going to end up being free. And we know that because he says this in 1850 in an earlier debate with a super pro-slavery Senator John C. Calhoun from South Carolina. So that's our insight into how he thought popular sovereignty would operate.
So one of the topics that we're exploring as we are exploring the state of Illinois is this topic of the Monument Men, right? We've got these statues, and the statues all over the country are dealing with a lot of vandalism.
Here's the question, dude. What do we do with all those statues?
What do we do with all those statues? All of the public will never agree on anything. Seldom agree on everything, right? So we're not going to get 100% ever, right? Because in other words, as soon as you put up a statue, as soon as you take down a statue, you are going to please some people and offend some people.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's fine. But if there isn't a system in place that provides for a true arbitration at the beginning and potentially at various points down the line, then I think that you create the problem that we have right now, which is without a system, then anarchy can become the system. So in other words, if you're a rebellious person and you asked and they said no, you begged and they said no, you tried to take part in any sort of debate and the debate was shot down.
You sound just like the patriots in the American Revolution. This is how they felt.
Then what do you do if you are truly offended as a large group by something in a public space? So did you check out the news today?
Yeah, and I think you're thinking what I'm thinking.
All of a sudden, we're working on a very topical project.
Yeah, so the Douglas Park, the Stephen A. Douglas Park in Chicago is now the Frederick Douglass Park, which was the fruit of 3 years of effort by some school children in Chicago who had been advocating for this for some time, and they finally got their way. The Park District is changing the name of the park.
So in the last 50 years, we probably had 3 times that Stephen A. Douglas has been in the news, right? And like twice this week.
All right, well, you're a bit pessimistic there on poor old Stephen, but yes, Michael Madigan proclaims that he wishes to take down the statues of Douglas in the state capitol and a picture of Douglas. So this has not been a good week for Stephen A. Douglas.
Well, if the school children were advocating for the park in Chicago, who's been advocating for this park for this change in the State House?
Well, the Black Lives Matter movement has had a huge impact on this, and locally there's a woman named Sunshine Clemens, who's the founder of Black Lives Matter in Springfield. She has called for this. I've seen that in the newspapers.
I think that looking at this particular moment right now, I think that the film's changing, and I think the film should continue to change. And I think that the more points of view, the more perspectives that we get, the more likely we can sort of put together a film that really tries to
the present.
Yeah, so in other words, we sort of started really looking at speaking to the past. We're looking much more at the past, and I just absolutely love it anytime that the past bumps hard up against the present, because it allows you to understand the reason that we do history, and the reason that I think it's really helpful to collect these stories and find out interesting ways to share these stories. in a democracy, the opportunity to have conversations and debate a subject. The whole topic of this film, the debate, right? And I think that if we can help, aid that debate by providing multiple points of view.
I think you're absolutely right. In fact, that just shows that we've got a great title coming. Instead of Lincoln and Douglas, the debate continues. It's Nathan and Graham saving democracy. I mean, that's what we're doing here. So,
all right, I'm going to work that title up. All right, who's coming in tomorrow?
Well, we've got Catherine Harris, who is a distinguished former director of the Abraham Lincoln Library here in Springfield, and who also is a really skilled Harriet Tubman and Elizabeth Keckley reenactor.
Okay.
And Harriet Tubman, the great conductor of the Underground Railroad, and Elizabeth Keckley was Mary Todd Lincoln's seamstress.
Okay.
And then in addition to Catherine Harris, we have Randy Duncan, who is a Lincoln reenactor, an up-and-coming young man, or well, middle-aged man probably, from Carlinville, but he's up-and-coming, highly recommended by the old salts of the Lincoln reenactment corps.
We know these words because some people knew Greg's shorthand, or a version of shorthand, and were sitting out in the audience jotting all this down. Can you imagine taking 3 hours worth of notes and then going off to the telegraph office and sending 3 hours worth of telegraphed shorthand notes to a newspaper home office so they could use their movable type, one letter at a time, to print out pages of debates? And they're starting to get it down, kind of like you guys have gotten it down. The reporter and the people back at the newspaper office are starting to work this thing.
I can cut this bit of the first one, I can take this bit of the second one, and this bit of the third one. Eureka! I linked them together in Premiere. I'm like, oh, it's lovely.
At Galesburg the other day, I said in answer to Judge Douglas that 3 years ago, there had never been a man, so far as I knew or believed, in the whole world who had ever said that the Declaration of Independence did not include Negroes in the term all men. I reassert it today. And when this new principle, this new proposition that no human being ever thought of 3 years ago is brought forward, I combat it as having an evil tendency, if not an evil design. I combat it as having a tendency to dehumanize the Negro, to take away from him the right of ever striving to be a man. I combat it as being one of the 1,000 things constantly done in these days to prepare the public mind to make property, and nothing but property, of the Negro in all the states of this Union.
So I think that looking at activists who are actually urging the destruction of those statues, although through lawful means, in the case of Sunshine Clemens, will give us a very interesting conversation between those perspectives, and then we can sort out what we think when we make the film, huh?
Right, or allow the viewer to make up their mind. Right, so in other words, I think that there's really a powerful value to sort of trying to decide what we think, but I think that ultimately...
Yeah, we can't save democracy by telling people what to think. I think we're finding the true story here.
My name is Sunshine Clemens, and I am co-founder and president of our local Black Lives Matter Springfield chapter. We've been up and running for almost 4 years now. We started in 2016 after the consecutive murders of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling. We didn't plan to start as an actual chapter. We just put on a rally, and it was just kind of a way for myself and the others that I organized with. We needed an outlet for our pain, and that birthed the rally. And then due to the support that we received, we realized that a chapter would actually be beneficial, so this could be something that was ongoing. So that's how we came to be, and that's what I do.
That is the real issue. That is the issue that will continue in this country when these poor tongues of Judge Douglas and myself shall be silent. It is the same spirit that says, you work and toil and earn bread, and I'll eat it. No matter in what shape it comes, whether from the mouth of a king who seeks to bestride the people of his nation and live by the fruit of their labor, or from one race of men as an apology for enslaving another race, it is the same tyrannical principle.
My daughter had a project where she was supposed to find these historical markers, and some of them related to African American history. Going around Springfield, they were so hard to find. We had, it was like a walking map that we had to find online, go find them ourselves. Our history is not prevalent. It's not, there are hardly any statues of our history unless you count, like, Martin Luther King, somebody that's acceptable and approved of across the board of all races. But we have to hunt for our history, whereas those who opposed us are on full display.
I was glad to express my gratitude at Quincy, and I re-express it here to Judge Douglas, that he looks to no end of the institution of slavery. That will help the people to see where the struggle really is. It will hereafter place with us all men who really do wish the wrong may have an end. Then there will soon be an end of it. And that end of slavery will be its ultimate extinction. It will again be placed where the wisest and best men of the world placed it.
We have these, glorification, figures or monuments, in various spaces, and almost always in public spaces that are supposed to be open and representative of everyone. And so I think they just naturally go together, because you can't say that, everyone is on an equal playing field and we respect all of you, but we're going to continue to glorify people that over time willfully and actively worked for your oppression.
I now state that willingly or unwillingly, purposely or without purpose, Judge Douglas has been the most prominent instrument in changing the position of the institution of slavery, which the fathers of the government expected would have come to an end ere this, and placing it where he openly confesses he has no desire that he shall ever see an end of it.
Do we require a statue to stand in a place of public prominence to learn from that person's history, or can we learn from that history without that statue being there?
Well, I think the question is easily answered. If you destroy a statue, what you're destroying is the historical landscape. You are not destroying the history. Those things often get confused. We should be very clear about the distinction. So the history of Stephen A. Douglas is not going to change if the statue is taken down. There will be a difference in how visible he is.
You definitely won't get any opposition from me for any statue that is being considered to come down for anyone who was either a slave owner or someone who was a direct financial beneficiary of slave ownership. I realize Stephen Douglas was not the owner. His wife technically was the slave owner. So I know people have tried to make that distinction, but he was a direct benefit of that, of the oppression of my people. And for me, especially when it comes to public spaces, like our state capitol building, a building that is supposed to be, the people's house and representative of all, if that's technically my house, I don't want to walk up and see someone who is either a slave owner or, next door, very tied closely, the spouse of a slave owner who actively participated in that. So I realize, people say it was socially acceptable at that time. that was true for some, but also at this point, I mean, you can look in some areas, there's stories that are coming out of, pedophilia in Hollywood. That's socially acceptable to some of them. That doesn't make it right, and it doesn't mean that it should be memorialized and honored. So whether it was socially acceptable to some at that time or not is irrelevant to me. I don't think that those statues and memorializations and glorification need to be upheld and continue to be paid for with taxpayer dollars for their maintenance and upkeep, etc.
But the people of the past still had something to say. Even when they were wrong, they had a point of view. Stephen Douglas, for instance, he went throughout the country, including in places where it was unpopular to do it, giving speeches in favor of preserving the Union. And he was vilified in some places for that. But even though he was at least ambivalent about slavery, if not in favor of it without being willing to say so, he was in favor of the Union and preserving the Union. And he took real risks to do that, risks that he didn't have to take.
Yes, he's afraid the country is going to crack up, and he was not wrong about this. We have to give him some credit. What he saw actually occurred, a horrendous carnage, a massive bloodbath, the scale of which, if we had it today, would be many, many, many millions of Americans who would die fighting each other. So he saw it, and he sought to avoid it.
Even if they're gone, what they did is still going to be there. I must say, I had never really thought about any of that until all of this happened, until George Floyd made us as a nation stop and think about the original sin of this country. And the original sin of this country is indeed, and I will believe this forever, was slavery. It's just a hard situation. Probably the most difficult thing that a person can do is to talk to a person of another race about race.
He was a enormous patriot. At the same time, he was one of the greatest race baiters in all of American history. And yes, he was willing to sacrifice Black people for white liberty. No question, that is true. Because that was a trait for him. He wanted to keep the country, and he loved liberty. It wasn't that he didn't love liberty. He just was willing to extrude Black people from it. And that's a very hard kind of historical truth, but it is a truth. And so I think what's done with the statues is up to the state legislature. I think we shouldn't fight too much as a country about symbolic things. The country's history is not going to disappear if it's taken down. On the other hand, Douglas is not going to jump off from the statue and give racist speeches anymore. It's a statue. It's cement and iron. And if we take them down, it's not going to hurt anyone or specifically help anyone. I think we should be clear on that. Any improvements that we make, we need to make. Just like people in the Civil War era changed their society and their law to improve their society.
A call for civic engagement there. I hear a call from you saying let's rewrite and let's make our own history more than rewrite our actual history.
If it's a place marker, if an event happened here, and there's history to be relevant and to be told, that's fine. If it's in a museum, we're not changing history. There's no way to change history. History is what it is, and it's still going to be taught in schools, but we don't have to glorify the bad parts of history.
So we are in some terrible times, and times of reflection, and times to think about where we are and the stories that we tell. I do think that taking the statues down, it can't be out of sight, out of mind. That doesn't solve anything, because what the statues represent, or whatever the role was of that person, just because you don't see it, it isn't going away. The story is still there. So what we perhaps need to do is to let the other shoe drop, so to speak. Let the other side of the story be known. But I certainly hope that we are just not, this isn't just a trending thing. You know how things trend. Let's hope it's just not that people genuinely want to learn the truth.
So let me just flip this whole thing for a second. Okay. The question is, for the whole film, let's just use this for a split second. Question for the whole film is, should we remove the statue of Stephen Douglas from the State House? Okay. First follow-up question, who is Stephen Douglas? Stephen Douglas, debated, was a senator, and he debated, was most famous by most people for having debated Lincoln in a senatorial race in advance of Lincoln becoming president, and then ran against him for president. And so we're going to go to each of these locations and meet some people who can give us a little bit of this, right? And then we're going to meet some people who think that we should take it down, some people who think that we shouldn't, and we'll talk to some people along the way, right? That's the film.
Now, will this be the final edition then?
No, this is what we're doing right now this week.
No.
This is a 10-minute video. Now, another video could be something else.
I see.
But this is this video that we're making right now, the 10-minute video. Right? We don't answer the question. We just ask the question. We get answers to the question. Right?
You just call it a 10-minute video?